Hello.
I can't believe you just did that. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of From BA to Broadway. You know who it is. It's me. It's Mr. Brennan, Stefanik, bringing you your general programming reminders. Folks, every Monday we are here with the main episode, and every Wednesday we are here with our mini-series. And, would you look at that? Today is Wednesday. Oh my goodness. Well, that means I cannot be here alone. No way. Of course I'm joined by the one and only Mr. Daniel J. Solly.
When you said today was Wednesday, I literally had a moment and I was like, no, it's not. But you are hearing this on Wednesday, so it is.
Yes, to them, their perception, we are...
Careful, they might think that these are pre-recorded.
We're bringing this to you live Wednesday morning.
Happy Wednesday.
Oh my God. Danny, what show are we talking about today?
I'm so excited. Today's a very special episode.
Why is it so special?
Well, it is the first time, I think, that we are talking about a show that is currently on Broadway, currently running.
You might be right.
We normally talk about shows from the past. Right now we're talking about a show that's currently running and very topical. We're going to talk about Suffs.
Whoa.
Probably should have been an episode for last week, but that's whatever.
You know what? We didn't know. We didn't know it needed to be an episode for last week. Republicans beware. Today we're talking about women's rights because we here at From BA to Broadway believe they should have them. Danny, take it away. I've never seen the show yet.
You haven't seen the show?
No,
okay.
I was actually thinking about seeing it.
I had two questions
today during the matinee.
You should have.
No, Wednesday.
Wait, today. Oh, yeah. Wednesday's matinee. You go to Wednesday's matinee.
There today.
I was like, they're dark today. Wednesday. Go on Wednesday. Go today.
I was thinking.
Matinee.
Yeah.
You should. Because that was my first question. You haven't seen the show. Do you know... Okay, back up.
Yes.
Suffs is a musical currently playing on Broadway with music, lyrics, and book by Shayna Taub, who is also currently starring in the leading role of Alice Paul.
Mm-hmm.
And the musical is about Alice Paul and the women's suffrage movement. And it was directed by Lee Silverman. My next question for you is, do you know a lot about the women's suffrage movement?
Not particularly. I know that the rights were not won until like is it 1920s or 1930s? 20s, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
which is crazy to think that our grandparents were probably alive during a time where our grandmothers could not vote.
It is so weird. I think maybe I just had a really feminist 8th grade teacher because like me and my friends from that age talk about this too. We know everything. Like when I saw Suffs, I was like, oh yeah, obviously like Alice Paul and the women's suffrage movement and like I knew every fact about it.
Wow.
And everyone else that I was seeing it with was like, I never learned this in school. And I was like, did I just have a feminist icon as an 8th grade history teacher? I think so. I think she was super young and like just out of school. And I think she was like, I'm going to teach these kids about women's suffrage. Because me and my like friends from middle school were all like, yeah, we know all of this.
Yeah.
And then everybody else is like, this is not something that's taught in school.
Heard.
So I think I just had a feminist teacher.
I'm sure it was taught during some U.S. history class of some sort, but like I've said before on this podcast, I was not the most academic.
I love this show. I've seen this show 4 times, but I have to say, I'll be able to caveat, I'm biased. So, best friend of the pod and best friend to me, Holly Gould, is currently in Suffs. They are the Alice Paul alternate.
That's not a bias.
That's a bias.
That's good taste.
Yeah, it's good taste. Went to college together, lived together for many, many years. Holly plays Alice Paul at I believe it's every Wednesday matinee they play Alice. And then they are obviously the first cover whenever Shayna calls out. So I saw the show during the pre-Broadway run at the Public. And then right when they opened on Broadway, I saw Wednesday matinee to see Holly. And me and my friend were sitting next to this woman and we were talking to her. And she was like, yeah, I'm visiting New York. I bought tickets. I really want to see Suffs. I'm such an idiot, though. I bought tickets for tonight. And I'm leaving town. So I had to buy tickets to the matinee as well. Do you want this night ticket? Because it's just going to go to waste. I have nothing to do with it. And I was like, I mean, I want to see Shayna do it, obviously.
She gave it to you for free?
And I got a free ticket.
Nuh-uh.
So right when they opened on Broadway, I saw the 2 p.m. matinee with Holly and the 8 p.m.
That's so funny.
show with Shayna. Because I was like, if I'm going to buy a ticket to a Broadway show, I'm going to go see when my friend is on.
Of course.
But I also would love to see Shayna do it.
Totally.
And I was offered a free ticket. So I was like, I'm just going to do 6 hours of Suffs in one day.
Yeah.
And then Holly was going on as Alice the Wednesday night after the election.
Mm-hmm.
Because Shayna was doing
Ragtime.
ragtime and encores. And I was like, come on, I gotta buy a ticket for when, like,
Of course.
I was like, this is gonna be such a beautiful celebration of our new female president the day after the election, seeing Suffs on Broadway. And obviously, our country decided that it hates women.
Mm-hmm.
And so it ended up being kind of a collective mourning,
Yeah.
if you will. But I have to say, that was the most electric audience I have ever been a part of. The cast was just like fucking crazy. They
Yeah.
were like leaving it all out there on the field. Like, they are the true MVPs of that week.
Excuse me. Pro-Burt podcast. Continue.
Not when we talk about women's suffrage.
Oh, I'm sorry.
This is an anti-burp
Listen.
episode.
Danny, girls burp too.
I thought you hate
girls
potty
burp
humor.
too.
You can't even talk about Urinetown. You're gonna burp for all the.
That's
for
not
your
potty
public?
humor. It comes out of your mouth.
You're gross. So that was the craziest audience I've ever sat through. It was so beautiful and joyous, and we were all just in our collective rage together. Wonderful. And now I'll tell you a little bit about the show, because I'm just talking about myself. So the show is based on the suffragists and the American women's suffrage movement. Suffrage is obviously the women's right to vote.
Mm-hmm.
Sounds like a bad thing, but it's really good.
Yep.
And it primarily focuses on all the historical events that lead up to the ratification of the 19th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution in 1920.
Wow.
So our protagonist of the show is obviously Alice Paul, who kind of comes onto the scene as a young, fiery activist. And the way that the women had been protesting previously was the kind of agreed upon method of getting women's suffrage was to, as politely and ladylike as possible, keep asking and keep asking. That was like the system set up by Susan B. Anthony and Mary Chapman Catt. And now, they were like, if we are ladylike and we appeal to these men, they will give us the right to vote. And so a young Alice Paul comes on the scene and she's like, this is not working. This is not taking quick enough. Like, we need to force this issue. We need to tell them that this is what has to happen. And so it details Alice organizing the March on Washington, D.C., her direct conflicts was with President Woodrow Wilson, her organization of the Silent Sentinels, which were the group of Suffs who would silently protest outside of the White House every single day, her arrest, and her time in jail, which was marked by leading a hunger strike and going through forced feeding and other forms of torture, all the way to eventually getting the 19th Amendment passed. And the show ends, I feel like it feels weird giving a spoiler, but this is history, so whatever.
That's true. It already happened.
They get the amendment passed, and
it ends with they get the right to vote.
They get the right to vote.
Spoiler, they win.
But it is kind of beautiful because the show ends in the 1970s, and we were watching an aged Alice who is still trying to get the Equal Rights Amendment passed, and she meets another young activist who, much like Alice at the beginning of the show, she comes on fiery onto the scene and she's like, this old school way of working isn't working. We need to focus on intersectional feminism, and we need to focus on this, that, and the other thing to make a cohesive movement. And it's that moment where Alice realizes that now she is part of the old guard and she needs to release into this new way of thinking that she once was.
Oh.
And so the cycle for equality continues.
Mm-hmm.
And it's this whole idea where it's you don't necessarily see the future that you're fighting for, but you just got to keep going.
Yeah.
And it's, I think there's a lot of parts of the show that are obviously dramatized, but I also think you learn a lot about the actual history.
Mm-hmm.
They had an off-Broadway production at the Public Theater in 2022, followed by a Broadway run, which opened at the Music Box in April of 2024. And for the most part, that cast was the same. I know they cast the show in, I want to say 2019.
Oh, wow.
I mean, Shayna began writing the show in 2010. She's been writing the show for the past 10, 15 years. And I know they started workshops in 2018, 2019, and there was a lot of stop and go because of COVID, obviously.
Yes.
And so they finally got their run going.
Does Shayna have a Broadway history? Because I had never heard of her until this came around.
Shayna I think was primarily a musical theater writer.
Oh, okay.
I know she was the recipient of the Jonathan Larson Grant, which is like a really, really prestigious grant for writers. She also is a performer.
Mm-hmm.
She was in the early workshops for Hadestown
Oh, wow.
as one of the Fates, and I believe she dropped out because she wanted to focus on writing Suffs.
Yeah.
I want to say she was a part of Great Comet, but I may be wrong. I don't know if she ever had anything to do with Great Comet. So I think she has been focused on Suffs for the past 10, 15 years, and that's kind of what she's been doing. But she just did... Ragtime. Ragtime at City Center. She played Emma Goldman, which I didn't get to see. But
we got to get you to see Hadestown too. I forgot all about that.
I know.
Let's do that soon.
So obviously, because these are all historical characters, I'm gonna run through them because I also think they should be recognized because they are the women who fought for women's suffrage. So obviously, at the top of the show, we have Alice Paul, played by Sheena Taub. We have Carrie Chapman Catt, who is a woman suffragist who symbolizes the old polite ways of protesting. And she really serves as Alice's main antagonist within the movement, played by Jen Colella. Ida B. Wells is a Black journalist, sociologist, and educator who pushed Alice to include Black women in the fight for suffrage and kind of pushed for more intersectionality, played by Nikki M. James. We have Lucy Burns, who is Alice's best friend, who is also her right-hand woman in the movement, played by Ali Bonino. We have Doris Stevens, who is another one of Alice's inner circle. She serves as the secretary of Alice's women's suffrage movement.
Yeah.
And she keeps a record, and she eventually wrote a book all about women's suffrage. And I think that is the book. Doris Stevens' book is the one that inspired the musical.
Gotcha.
Played by Nadia Dundashi. And then we have Róża Węslowska. This is a Polish-American suffragist and union organizer who helps Alice with the movement, played by Kim Blanc. Inez Milholland is a socialite who Alice recruited to be the face of the movement and speak to the crowds at rallies. Philippa Sue originated the part at the Public, but then Hannah Cruz took over for the Broadway run. We have Mary Church Terrell, which is a Black civil rights activist, and she often conflicts with Ida B. Wells because Mary Church Terrell was taking the approach of, she was like, we have to work within these white women's ways of protesting, and eventually they'll let us have more intersectionality.
Yeah.
Where Ida B. Wells had more of the, like, we need to demand intersectionality now.
Gotcha.
She was played by Anastasia McCluskey. We have Dudley Malone, who is Woodrow Wilson's chief of staff, who eventually becomes a Suff and publicly denounces Wilson, played by Salala Brock. Obviously, President Woodrow Wilson, who is kind of the villain of the piece and vehemently opposed women's suffrage, played by Grace McLean. And we have Ava Belmont, a socialite who helped fund Alice's efforts, played by Emily Skinner.
Wow.
So those are our key players and all of our key actors and actresses. Shano won 2 Tony Awards for this musical for Best Book of a Musical and Best Original Score.
Wow.
She was also nominated for Best Musical, but did not win. And Nikki M. James was nominated for Best Featured Actress in a Musical. And
yeah, no, I mean, like, I feel like when this started, it was like the political piece of theater. You know, like, I feel like there's always one. You know, there's always one that's in a season or for whatever to, like, have a message and, you know, all that kind of stuff. But now it has become ever so important.
It was also really crazy seeing the show on Wednesday and, like, it's still so prevalent.
What was the audience demographic like, if you had to generalize?
Like New York liberals,
Great.
I would say.
Great.
But just like all the things that they're saying, and this is like 1913 that they're portraying, it's just true.
Yeah.
It's just true. And it's like a little heartbreaking, but I guess also inspiring to know that, like, you just fight and you win a little, and then you keep fighting, and then you win a little, and then you keep fighting and you win a little. And there's a line in the show. Oh God, I'm going to screw it up. It's in one of the songs. And she's like, you know, because contraception's a federal crime. And can you believe that all of these things are true? And it's 1913, as if that is like the new age of progressivism.
Yeah.
And instead of like being an applause line, it was more of like a gut punch line, because we were all like, oh my God.
Yeah.
Similar to in Merrily. Did you see Merrily?
I did not.
Oh, there's a line in Merrily, which was written in 1970, 1980. And a newscaster is saying, you know, and in other news, you know, the Supreme Court just made a decision on Roe v. Wade, which put to rest the issue of abortion, and now we never have to question a woman's right to choose. And I remember I saw that within the past year. And it's another one of those lines where that's just like a gut punch. And it's like, oh, we just went back.
Truly.
Like we went back. And now these lines that are talking about a time period that were supposed to be so long ago are so prevalent right now. And I think that I don't know. I'm just like in awe of what Shayna was able to put together to write a comprehensive musical about a very detailed moment in U.S. history.
Yeah.
And write the book, the music, and the lyrics into like, it's a really cohesive musical. And she does that thing where it's like you have to streamline so much information in a very digestible way in like a 2 to 3 minute song. Something that like Sondheim is so good at. If you look at like the Into the Woods prologue, I think that's like the best example we have of like, in 10 minutes, I'm going to set up 10 storylines and you're going to know exactly who everybody is and what they want.
Yeah.
And I think that she did such a beautiful job in Suffs in portraying that. And I think seeing it also from the public to Broadway, like she rewrote a lot of the musical between the public and the Broadway. And she took, I think in the public, they got mixed reviews. Like they didn't get really great reviews.
Yeah.
And she took every note and she took every criticism. She rewrote it. I think she really did a lot of work on, like Alice Paul did spearhead the movement. And she's a huge reason why the 19th Amendment was passed.
Yeah.
But she also was an imperfect activist. She was, a white feminist, and she tried to implement the Black women marching at the back in the march, and I don't think that Shayna, she's the protagonist, but she's not necessarily positioned as the unfailing hero of the story.
Which the show has gotten criticism about.
I guess I'll start by saying that, like, I recognize I am a white cis man.
For sure.
So that is where my lens is coming from. And I think that no show is above criticism.
Of course.
I think there is probably criticism to be made of this show. The criticism that I myself have seen feels like it was made by people who have not seen the show.
Gotcha.
I know that, when did this happen? A couple months ago. Do you remember when in the middle of Suffs, protesters like interrupted the show and put out banners
from the boxes,
and they're like, close Suffs right now, like this is terrible white feminism, and they had a link to their website, and on their website there was just like a list of like things where it's like, did you know that Alice Paul wanted the Black women to stand in the back of the march? Things Suffs will not tell you because they are glorifying white feminism. And I'm like, well, actually, there is an entire song where Ida B. Wells comes for Alice's throat that Nikki M. James was nominated for a Tony Award for, where, it's the whole song is called Wait My Turn, and she's like, how dare you tell me to wait my turn, you white woman. I will stand in the front with my delegates or I won't march. And it just, if you're going to criticize the show, watch the show and digest the show, and then make a valid criticism. Don't say like, well, you never addressed this. And I'm like, well, there's like a 5-minute song addressing this.
For sure.
So that was my issue with the criticism. I was like, it doesn't feel rooted in having watched the show.
Truly.
And if you're gonna, like, I guess there's a world where you say we shouldn't be platforming Alice Paul because of white feminism. And I guess that's a whole conversation you can have.
Yes.
But I think it's just like a dishonest take to say, well, did you know that she was imperfect? And I'm like, well, yeah, she's not written as perfect.
Yeah, I agree with that.
And I think Shayna did a really wonderful job because that is something that wasn't necessarily as prevalent in the public run.
Yeah.
And I think Suffs also exists in a really interesting time because in the middle of her writing it and kind of in the middle of her run at the public, there was a huge social reckoning.
Yeah.
And I think that she was able to kind of take all of that in and add it into the Broadway run. And I remember watching public run and thinking, okay, I feel like you wrote this musical and then there was a social movement and you were like, oh shit, I gotta add intersectionality into this musical.
Yeah.
And that's how it felt. And then watching it on Broadway again, I was like, you fixed you fixed this specific problem. It didn't feel shoehorned in. It felt like an honest portrayal of these people.
It's also just one of those things where like you can't tell all the stories in 2.5 hours,
Yeah.
Where like obviously like the intersectionality is very important and a huge part of the show, but like for all the people criticizing all of the things that it didn't do, like once again, there are victories to be had in the fact that it exists in the first place, the fact that it is on Broadway, the fact that it exists in this day and age, and like...
Well, I guess the also argument, I guess, to be made is, you know, not to platform her as this like hero of feminism, because she, you know, is not by today's standards, but if we're going to learn history, like that is how it happened. Like if we're going to look at how how women have the right to vote, like that's how it happened.
Yes. And
I think that one of the most poignant moments in the show for me is that, so they passed the 19th Amendment, and, you know, as soon as like the governor says aye, and it's supposedly a huge celebration, the curtains close and you have the 3 Black women standing on stage: Ida B. Wells, Mary Church Terrell, and her daughter. And they are celebrating, and then there's like a really poignant moment where Ida B. Wells says they'll still stop our women from voting the same as they do our men.
Yeah.
And I really am glad that she didn't sit in the celebration of it.
Totally.
And kind of zoomed out and was like, this was a win, but also not a win.
No.
Like, this was not a win for everybody.
For sure.
In every sense of the word. And also, I want to point out, there's a really, really wonderful Playbill article called Inside the Process of Writing and Rewriting the 36 Songs of Suffs, where Shayna goes through every single song in the score and kind of like writes a little paragraph about it.
Oh, wow.
Like she writes about like how she wrote the song, what the song's purpose in the show is. And I love it. I think that like if every writer had to go through their score and justify every single song in a paragraph, we'd have much better musicals written.
That's fair.
Like just like reading it, I mean I know I'm like a total nerd about this stuff, but reading,
that's so cool though,
the writer's perspective of like, yeah, this was a really tricky song, but I was trying to do this, this, and this with this song, and that's what I was trying to fit into this song, and that's why this song isn't, you know, I think it's a really interesting article if you're like even a little bit of a nerd about theater and about like the behind the scenes creation of it.
Yes.
I would really recommend looking it up and reading it. It's really, really interesting.
For sure. That's awesome. Yeah, I just think it's one of those things where I'm like, it's hard to separate being objective about these kinds of conversations with the reality that you and I are currently sitting in too, you know, where it's just like, I'm not going to say that we're right, you know, I'm not going to say that Democrats are right. I'm not going to say all of that stuff.
Want me to say that?
Yeah.
Democrats are right.
Like, the thing is, like...
Sorry.
We have...
Be poignant.
No,
what are you saying?
We, like, the institution of theater, the institution of Broadway celebrates specific, like, a wide array of stories, but, like, very specific kinds of stories with very specific kinds of messages. You know, like... There's no Joe Rogan the musical, you know? It's like the platforms that spew the hate and stuff just don't exist as prevalently, I will at least say, or as in the forefront of theater in the theater industry. And like, it's one of those things where it feels weird that people consume this kind of thing and don't get what it is out of it, you know? Like families are coming from all over to see their Broadway show and whatnot. And it's like, they're not looking at the community behind it. They're not looking at the actors and actresses and the messages behind the stuff. It is just television to them in a very, they have no stakes in the matter, which feels so, I mean, obviously like we have our perspective because of who we are and where we are in it. But like, it's so wild to me that we are just in this day and age still where people can't see that what we are celebrating is the good things, the freedom, the love, you know?
Yeah, well, I think an interesting choice they made with this show is that Hillary Clinton is an investor.
Yes.
In Suffs. And they made the decision to really broadcast that.
Yes.
Like that was a selling point for them. Hillary Clinton introduced them at the Tony Awards. And I think, you know, like whether you love her, hate her, agree with her, didn't vote for her, whatever, that is a really controversial choice just from the PR of it all.
Okay.
You know, like in the New York liberal bubble that we live in, we're kind of like, oh my God, that's so cool. You got her to invest in your Broadway show. That's amazing. She should have been the president. But I think if your goal is to have diverse minds come and consume your art and maybe broaden a little bit, I don't know that having her name attached was the smartest move.
I mean, that's valid.
And I know that Suffs did unfortunately make the rounds on the dark side of Twitter and TikTok and stuff. And a lot of things, you know, people were saying like, look, Hillary Clinton's musical is running on Broadway about these women just complaining about their lives without any context of like, this is actually a historical piece about something that happened, you know, in 1913. It's not like Hillary Clinton saying that women, I mean, they don't have rights today, but like, it's not Hillary Clinton saying women don't have rights today and are treated poorly. It's, I think because her name is so attached to it, it took on, you know, for better or for worse, I mean, for worse, it took on a life that Suffs isn't about.
But then, like, once again, like, that's just the misogyny of it all. Like, it's once again the people making their judgments
100%.
without having seen
the show.
I
also just wonder, like, would a more diverse group of people, and I mean diverse of like maybe political affiliation, have stumbled into that theater if they didn't see like Hillary Clinton's name attached to it? I don't know. I don't know. Like maybe that's just, but that's just.
But also like,
because like I remember thinking like, oh, that's a choice. Like Hillary Clinton being involved is exciting for a person like me.
Yeah.
But for every person like us, there's probably like 10 people who are like, oh, I'll never even touch that musical now. And I think it's interesting now they're launching a tour.
Yeah.
I really wonder what that's going to look like.
I'm sure they're not going to be able to play some states or some cities.
In light of current events.
Yeah. Also, but like my thing with that too is it's like they weren't going to come see the show anyways. You know?
That's true.
It's truly about women's rights and
they don't believe in them.
And they don't believe in them. If you are supporting that party, you are actively voting for the right to take rights away from women.
Yeah.
Every woman in your life, you are actively trying to screw over. So that's tea.
Also fair.
That's the tea. It's like they weren't going to come see it. They saw another reason to hate on Hillary, hate a woman, and they took it and they ran with it. But also, are those the kinds of people we want in our spaces? I struggle with this too, because I'm like, we preach all of these things about the freedom and the being able to love who you love and have your views and whatever. But it's like, it's so hard to conceptualize the fact that we are actively creating spaces for the people who think we shouldn't exist.
Yeah, which I guess ties directly into what's going on at a certain Andrew Lloyd Webber musical right now with a Trump supporter leading the show.
I didn't know that was Andrew Lloyd Webber.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was also just...
I think it's tricky, and I understand the nuance, but I also, I'm not the first person to say this, everyone's kind of saying this, where it's like, I'm sorry, but at the end of the day, these Broadway stars and these divas, they're customer service workers.
Oh, of course.
Like, you only are famous, you only have a platform as long as we spend our money seeing you.
That's exactly right.
And so if you are going to build a career and build a platform off of cultivating a queer audience, which at Sunset Boulevard specifically did and does.
Yes.
Like it's for the queers, it's for the gays. And they built this, this character and this actress up to be like a diva for the gays. And if you support an administration that actively seeks to limit and harm them, then like, I'm not saying you should be like cast out to sea, but I'm not spending my hard worked money to support you.
Yeah, I don't want to give you money for you to then...
Like, people are like, don't boycott the show. And I'm like, okay, but I'm also not going to spend $100 to see someone who votes against my interests as a human being.
Yeah.
So, like, your platform on a Broadway stage is not a God-given right.
No.
I'm not saying you shouldn't be able to work or make money for the rest of your days, but I'm not saying that you should be like a champion for the gays starring in this musical.
Of course.
If you're voting against their civil rights. So that's my thing. And I'm like, and I get that this specific instance is tricky because it's not like she's wearing a MAGA hat and she hasn't like said I voted for Trump, but she also hasn't said she didn't.
Yeah.
And I'm like, did you read her like half-assed apology?
No, I didn't.
Oh, she wrote this like half-assed apology that just kind of like skirted around the entire issue.
Heard.
And I'm like, it's just not good enough. I'm sorry. Like, people's like rights are on the line, and if you're not emphatically saying like I stand with the gay and like specifically the gay community, just because that's who she panders to.
Yeah.
Like, I think they did, and they were like doing advertisements for this revival on Fire Island. Like, you were pandering to the gays.
Yeah.
And so unless you're gonna come out and like support us with your chest, then I am not going to give you my money.
Yeah.
Because this is like a free market, and that's how it works.
Yeah,
like I'm not blacklisting her and saying that she should be like blacklisted from ever making a dollar to her name.
Yes.
But you also can't say like, hey, you must buy tickets to go see her.
Of course.
And that's kind of where I stand. I don't know.
I agree.
And I understand the whole like separating art from artist debate. But I think I don't know. I think it's different. I think if you're like, yeah, guys, I voted for Bush, I wouldn't care.
It's like,
this is just like it's a difference in morals.
Well, I said on the episode earlier this week with El Morgan, I was like, my first election, I would assume it was yours too, was
my first presidential election
Trump
was
v. Hillary.
2016.
Yeah.
And
that was the first election that we voted in where the stakes were higher than any other in the lifetime of our predecessors. You know, like the arena that was created for us in voting was just cranked up to 11, immediately. So the stakes that we have just feel so much higher because we have seen the repercussions. Also, quite frankly, we are in the demographics that suffered after the 2016 election, of the LGBTQ community, of the theater community in general, Like, people just don't understand that they are actively contributing to the creation of a world in which people like us get hate crimed, Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I would... Look, I won't say names, but if you are in the cast of Sunset Boulevard, please text me. I gotta know, what is the environment like in that backstage? Like, what is going on?
Where can they text you? What's your number?
My number is... Let me just pull up your number.
Oh my God. I've done it before.
At DSols on Instagram. DM me. We need eyes in that theater.
Yeah.
Because it's also like you're not even just pandering to the gay consumers. Your coworkers are all gay and women and people of color, and like I think that like Broadway conservatives, there's probably a lot more than we know, and not that like I'm not saying,
but like it's the J.K. Rowling of it all. Keep your mouth shut. Nobody asked. Literally nobody asked.
It's also funny because I'm like, do you have no sense of self-preservation? And like, look what happened to Laura Osno.
Literally.
She lives in Tennessee now.
No kidding.
They bullied her out of New York.
Truly.
Like, it's funny because on one hand, I'm like, oh, I'm glad we know I'm not going to give you my dollars. But on the other hand, I'm like, if that was me, delete your Instagram. I think of all the people who are like, all the celebrities who are like we consider to be unproblematic faves. I'm like, no, the secret is that they just don't have social media.
Yeah.
Like Daniel Radcliffe could be like an abhorrent person, but we don't know because he doesn't have Instagram. He's not... I mean, I'm sure he's lovely.
I'm sure he's incredibly lovely.
Delightful. But like also...
Who's to say?
He can't get himself into trouble because he's not tweeting dumb shit on whatever. Like, delete your social media, people.
At the end of the day, the theater community and Broadway and just the art in general is a space created to celebrate everyone. And I do mean the problematic people and whatnot, but you cannot be one of those people in order to contribute to that.
It's like, well, you can't proudly vote for the harm of a community and then expect to A, work in that community, and B, be supported by that community.
And profit heavily from that community.
Yes. Like, it just... It's... Yeah. And I know, like, a big thing about when they were protesting at Suffs, too.
Yeah.
Like, there's a lot of Black women in that cast, and they were like, you're just completely erasing our contribution to this work.
Yeah.
Like, you think that we don't do you think that we didn't have a voice in creating these parts and in building this art with
You think it's just a paycheck?
the white creators? Like
Yeah.
we're in this and you're just like completely erasing my presence in this
Ask them.
in
Talk
this
to them
show.
about it.
Yeah, like
Write to them.
write to me and let me speak out on my opinions.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know how I got there, but I just
It's tough. It's just tough. It's a tough world.
it's a tough world. Unfortunately, Suffs is closing.
Yes.
They
got a good run,
are-
though. How?
In
What?
kind of an ironic twist, their closing date is January 5th.
Oof.
Yeah. I really wish,
Ironic or aptly timed? Who's
I
to say?
really wish it was just like one day more.
Yeah.
Like I'd go to that closing night. Come on.
Maybe they have plans for the next day.
Hopefully they're gonna like hydrate and sleep. They deserve it.
Yeah. I would say it got a healthy run though.
It did. It got a healthy run.
I'm also at the point too where I'm like, sometimes things are feeling like, unless it's a museum piece on Broadway, sometimes you just got to close and make room for something new.
Yeah, I think it's a really wonderful piece.
Mhm.
I actually think, and I've seen a lot of people say this online too, I think it's going to be a fascinating piece to revisit after a couple of years.
Yeah.
I think it really has the potential to be one of those shows that like comes back in like 10 years or so with a director with like a different kind of a vision for it. And it could be a really, really cool and poignant piece for a different time.
Also, I'm sure as soon as it hits the regional market, it's going to be...
Well, I was going to say too, I also think it's important that it goes on tour.
Yep.
I think it's a wonderful show because it's also all women and non-binary performers. There's no men in the cast. So I think it lends itself well to like, I don't know, school. like, no boys. Yeah, I think it's really wonderful. I would love it to run longer just because I want all my friends to have jobs.
Of course.
If you're going to go see either Holly or Shayna. Something I also really love about the show, and this is more, I guess, on the artistic direction. I don't know. Like, Holly and Shayna are very different performers. And you're getting a very different show if you see either or.
Cool.
Which I so appreciate.
Yeah.
I think sometimes people will cast, through both just casting and direction.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of like, okay, do what the person does.
Exactly.
Do what the person does. But I think that Holly and Shayna are both very singular performers with their own set of like really great strengths, and they were given the opportunity, I guess, like more Holly was given the opportunity because Shayna's playing the part full time, to create their own character.
Yeah.
And so it was cool to see because I saw both of them in one day. I saw like Holly did the matinee and Shayna did the night show.
Yeah.
And I loved it. And I was like, I have so many things to say about Holly's, and all of my things to say about Shayna's are so different because it was just like a completely different performance, and it didn't feel like, I think sometimes, do you ever see an understudy and you're like, okay, the director told you to just do the thing that they're doing, and it didn't feel like that. No. And I really applaud that artistry, and I wish and hope that is like what happens.
Yeah.
Because I think it's really cool when you're hiring a performer to do, like, the understudy's not doing the part 8 times a week, but they're doing all the work. They're a professional actor. And so I think it's wonderful when we can let them do their work.
Yes.
As opposed to just doing mimicry.
For sure. Which is nice. I feel like we are starting to see that pop up a little bit more. Like, even like, Oh Mary. Like, the understudy of Cola Sparza, I believe, is a woman.
You say Cola Sparza?
Cola Scola is, I believe,
Imagine if Raul Esparza was playing Mary Todd Lincoln. No, you're right.
Yeah. So,
and I think that is fascinating.
So cool.
Yeah.
So cool.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see more of that.
I wonder, this is totally out of left field. I was going to say, I wonder who Audra's understudy is.
I don't know, but they're probably going to
Patty LuPone.
If it's someone unknown, they're probably going to get uber famous. It's probably going to be another Julie Benko situation.
No, I think what's going to happen is Audra's not going to miss a single performance.
Okay.
Or at some point in the run, they might get like a matinee, like a Wednesday rose, the way that they did with Hello Dolly.
Heard.
With friend of the pod, Donna Murphy. Do you know about that?
I do, but also stop saying that.
I think if we say it enough times, we'll manifest
You're
it.
going to get me in trouble.
If we say it enough times, we're going to manifest
Okay.
it.
I'll try and make it happen. Who's to say?
Ask her.
Yeah.
Ask her. Donna,
I'll just send her a message.
we need you on the pod.
Yeah.
Like now.
Yeah. Donna, do you remember me? No?
Mhm.
Okay. You want to come on the pod?
Yeah. So go see Suffs before it closes.
Go see Suffs.
Go see Holly because they're my bestie, but if you can't, go see Shayna because they're also brilliant. I also think it's really special to see a person perform their own work.
Yeah.
Like I've seen it a couple of times. I saw Lynn do Hamilton. Brag, brag. I saw
Sarah.
No, I never saw Sarah do Waitress.
Oh.
Unfortunately. I've seen bootlegs, obviously.
Of course.
I saw Dave Malloy do Great Comet.
Okay, cool.
I saw Shayna do Suffs. I think those are like the big three that I've seen.
Gotcha.
And it's something special. Like when they just have the scores in them in a way that it will be in no other person in the world.
It
And
came
that's
from their soul.
And that doesn't mean that like X, Y, and Z, they're the only people who would ever do a good performance of it.
Yeah.
It's just, it is a marked difference when you're seeing someone perform the work that they wrote.
Yeah.
They just, like, it's in there in a different way.
They know it. They know it for the most specific reasons.
Yeah, like,
And
it's almost like on a cellular level, they, like, know this material.
Yeah.
And I mean, obviously, I think that's kind of like why people love singer-songwriters, where you're watching people perform their own stuff. But I think it adds another level when it's like, oh, you're playing a character, but you're still singing the songs that you wrote.
Yeah.
I think that's like the magic of Lynn. I mean, he's obviously brilliant in everything he writes, but I think, everyone like jokes about him just playing the parts, but I'm like, yeah, and like that is so gripping to watch him play these parts.
He writes such specific niche kinds of shows that it is so to see it actually lived in a way where you're like, oh, like I had no attachment to this prior to coming in this performance, but now this just feels so normal and regular, And
it's like, it's so inspiring. I think, specifically with Lynn and Shayna, because I think they both wrote those roles for themselves.
For sure.
Like Shayna's been writing this, like this is Shayna's part. She's been writing it for 10 plus years. And it really, I don't know, you hear it all the time where they're like, you don't see yourself, write your own thing.
Yeah.
And I think Lynn got a lot of shit for that because we got oversaturated with him at a certain point in time. But I'm also like, what do you want? Everyone told him to write his own shit because he wasn't getting cast. Yeah. And he finally did it and it's super successful and now you're making fun of him.
Totally.
So I don't know. I think that's also really cool. If you ever have the opportunity to like watch the composer perform their work, it's a really special kind of performance. I think.
Who's going to champion their own work better than themselves? No one.
No one.
There you go.
Besides the alternate.
Also that.
Holly Gould. They'll champion it.
For sure.
But it's a special show. Suffs is I think it's a special show. It also has a great, like the soundtrack is great.
Yeah.
Like it's hard to describe. It's like well done. Like some soundtracks aren't like particularly well done.
Yeah.
This is like a very well crafted soundtrack. And I think that if you listen to it, it's really cohesive in telling the story of the show.
Yeah.
In a way that like not all soundtracks are. And I think that this is Suffs in particular is a very music forward show.
Yep.
At the Public, it was sung through. There weren't any book scenes. And she wrote a bunch of book scenes and turned songs into book scenes for the Broadway run. And I think because of that, the score is just like really cohesive and streamlined. And so if you listen to the soundtrack from start to finish, it's like a really good listening of the full show.
Yeah. And because this is the first time that we've done the show on Broadway, are we putting these songs in our book? Not yet, I would say.
I don't know. Why not?
I would just say wait till the Broadway run closes. I feel like that's always the stigma.
I guess. Maybe. I think there's some really wonderful solo pieces in the show, actually.
Great.
For our alto and mezzo voices.
Lovely.
And it's, There's some really great comedic stuff. I think the Woodrow Wilson song is probably going to be like a standard comedy song.
Heard.
It should be. It's really good.
Heard.
It's good. You should see it. Go see it on Wednesday.
I want to.
Go.
I want to. I'm setting the intention right now. Do they have Rush?
Yes, they do.
Okay, cool.
They do. It might be hard right now. Like, I think on Wednesday, the Rush line was like crazy bananas. but
Damn.
You should go see it.
I'll try.
No,
I mean, I'll do.
No, you will.
Well, I'll go to Rush and
Yeah.
we'll see what the fates have in store for
Get
me.
your ass up and rush.
Well, there you have it, folks. Go see Suffs.
Yeah.
Support women's rights.
Support women's rights.
And support women's wrongs, too.
Support women. Support the
Support women.
gays. Support the theys.
Support everyone.
Girls, gays, theys. We love them. We need to be louder for them and support them.
Yes.
And I don't know, go, punch a Nazi, aka a Trump supporter.
Go punch them. No, you're right. Listen, I have a feeling that if you are supporting Trump supporters, this is not the podcast for you. I have a feeling you have not listened to this and have tuned out by now for sure.
Or you just need to go see Suffs. Just go see Suffs.
Just go see Suffs. Yeah. Everyone's welcome here. However, these are the beliefs and things that we value here. And I personally expect that everyone else should.
Oh my God, the CEO of BA to Broadway just
listen, this is my platform.
Shredding tracks now,
I gave
guys.
it to myself.
You're gonna lose every this is when Brennan finds out that his whole following,
my God,
he has somehow garnered a horrifically conservative following, and your follow count just goes to 0.
It's just all the reds in theater, and
You're
oh my God, yeah.
And then you just delete every episode and pretend this podcast never happened.
Oh my God, no! I'll archive them, and then one day I'll bring them back.
Or that's how you become a champion for the Broadway conservatives.
I'll just start re-releasing things from episode 1 and pretend it's brand new. Oh my God. Wow. Yeah. Okay. Well, folks.
That'll keep Brennan up at night.
Yeah. We could talk about, oh my God, we almost talked about this for an hour. We could talk about it for hours more. So.
And that's how I got my Wednesday episodes to be the main series.
There you go. Okay, folks. Thank you so much for tuning in. If there's a certain show you want to hear us talk about, you can let us know by finding us over on Patreon. That is patreon.com/BA2Broadway. Come on over there. Check us out. As always, you can find us on most social media platforms at BA2Broadway. You can find me at Brennan Stefanik.
You can find me at Kamala Harris. Go to her followers and her biggest supporters, D. Sauls.
There you go. And you know what? Send us some hate mail. If you didn't like what we said,
please do.
Send us some hate mail. I would love to have haters.
New York.
I can't believe you just did that. I meant in our DMs, Danny. I didn't mean our actual mailbox. It is so skinny to begin with. We can barely fit regular mail in there. Never mind all of the hate mail we're about to get. Yeah, send us your hate mail, because you know what? That means we've made it. That's what I say to that. Anywho, folks, until next week, bye. From BA to Broadway is created, produced, and edited by Brennan Stefanik, music by Dylan Kaufman, and cover art by Jordan Vongsithi.